Coming up, Canada's High Commissioner to Cameroon, Richard Bale, will be our guest today. After 2 years in service in Cameroon, High Commissioner Richard Bale is known for his keen interest and dedication to Cameroonian culture. Join us in a moment as he talks about his experience in Cameroon and his role in the ongoing YARRA Film Festival. Coming up this Tuesday on Cameroon Feeling.
You're welcome back. It's Cameroon Feeling on CRTV, and I'm sure you can hear a voice talking. Is His Excellency Richard Bale, Canadian High Commissioner to Cameroon. You are welcome.
Thank you very much, Patience. It's a real pleasure to be here this morning.
We're happy to have you. How's the morning been so far for you?
Not too bad. Although we had an event last night and I stayed up a little bit too late. So I struggled a bit this morning and I thought, I'm going to be on television, so I better have an extra coffee. So that's what I did. And
you don't look tired at all. So let's say that's successful.
Okay. Well, it was good Cameroonian coffee, so.
Right.
Gave me a
good
Cameroonian gave me a boost.
Okay. You're here to talk about your presence at the YARRA Film Festival, but we cannot have you on the program and not have you tell us about your experience culturally living in Cameroon. So we'll talk about that as well.
Okay.
But first off, you've been present in Cameroon since 2019, making your presence felt. What is the most beautiful part about Cameroon to you?
You know, it's maybe it's I say this because I'm a Canadian, but the thing that I like the best about Cameroon actually is the bilingualism. So every day I'm living in both English and French. And that's both at the office, at the embassy, and outside. And that's an element that I really enjoy about Cameroon. And Cameroon is, I have to say, it's, and I think most Canadians react this way. It's, even though we know in theory that Cameroon is bilingual, when we come here, I think we're very positively impressed. It's more bilingual than we expected.
Yes.
So, and as Canadians, I mean, we need to kind of practice keep our bilingual muscles in shape.
And
in Cameroon, it's perfect.
Here.
Absolutely.
You can switch to French. On peut parler français maintenant.
Pas de problème.
Et puis passer en anglais and continue the show in English.
Exactement.
We have to be able to appreciate that more in our country. I think we have to do that more, seeing how beautifully you appreciate that in our country. I think we as Cameroonians have to know that the fact that we can switch to both languages at any point is a strength.
Yeah, and I think that's happening more and more with young people in Cameroon. So Canadians will always ask, if they're talking to somebody in a mixture of English and French, we always reflexively ask, and I think this comes from Canada, we'll ask, so are you Francophone or Anglophone? And I find often young Cameroonians look at me like, what kind of a stupid question is that? Because for younger Cameroonians, they don't make that distinction quite so much.
That's true.
And they speak the two languages equally well. So that's been an interesting experience.
Okay. Well, just a little history of your life. You obtained your Bachelor of Arts in 1977 from the University of British Columbia.
Right. So Vancouver on the west coast of Canada.
So you've always been passionate about the arts. Where did that come from?
You know, my first degree actually was, I don't talk about this much, but my first degree was in English literature.
Okay.
And so I guess from the beginning, that was what I was interested in. But it's not easy to make a career out of English literature. Some people do, but no, I wasn't successful. So I had to go off in another direction, which ended up being joining Canada's diplomatic service. Yes. And I have found that one of the elements, you know, you do many things. You're responsible for many different areas, but one of the things I've really enjoyed is working in culture, which sometimes we have the opportunity to do. You mentioned when we were chatting just before just a few minutes ago that I was posted previously in Mumbai.
Yes.
And of course Mumbai is the home of Bollywood, and inevitably you get involved in that scene, and I mean, there are certain Bollywood actors or choreographers who have links to Canada, and you meet those people and you get to know them, and you end up doing, you know, some kind of Canada Canada-India cooperation in that sector, in the film sector, so that was fascinating. So I've been very happy here in Cameroon also to engage somewhat in the cultural sector.
Yes, and our film industry is growing in a big way.
It's like there's this boom.
There's a boom. I'm so excited even talking about it because we have seen the struggle continue for so many years, and to finally see that recognition happening, there's so much satisfaction in it. Have you watched any Cameroonian movies?
Well, I watched Fisherman's Diary,
Great.
so that was on, that was
What did you think of it?
That was a fantastic film.
Okay.
I mean, it took this, a very unfortunate reality that exists in some places in Cameroon, it was a very effective, dramatic presentation of that situation, and I think it's fantastic that film was able, it made it onto that Netflix platform.
Yes.
Which of course gives the film and gives Cameroon a much wider audience, but also I think carved a path for subsequent films, because I'm sure, I don't know how the Netflix people think, but I'm sure they looked at that and said, okay, if there's one Cameroonian film, if there's the talent here to produce that film, there must be talent to
I do
produce
agree,
others.
Because right now on Netflix we have about 3 Cameroonian movies.
Yeah, so there's also A Man for the Weekend.
A Man for the Weekend.
And
Broken.
Broken, right,
Yes.
right.
I think a 4th one as well. So we have quite a number of Cameroonian movies on Netflix in case you want to watch. But you're here to talk about the YARRA Film Festival.
Right,
How are you implicated in this?
Okay, so Canada was invited this year by the festival as they call it the host country. I think of it more as the country of focus, although even that's not true, because the real country of focus first is Cameroon.
Cameroon, yes.
But each year the festival invites a foreign country to participate, and as you know, this is the 8th edition of the film festival. Canada, this is the first time we were invited, so we were we were flattered, shall I say, and very pleased to engage. And principally what that means is that gives us the opportunity to bring some Canadian films to be presented at the festival. Okay. And we have 2 in competition. So there's 10 films in competition, 2 of them Canadian. And then we have 1. We were supposed to have 2 other films, but with films, one of the tricky things is the rights, and it turned out that even though we physically have a 4th film here, unfortunately we weren't able to arrange for that. But that means, and of course the YARHA, its principal focus is and needs to be on Cameroon film. Next focus needs to be on African film. But it is called an international film festival. Yes. And I think it's always good for people in the film industry to get exposure to films from another, let's say, non-African country.
Yes.
Partly to see what the traditions are, how do people make films. And in the case of Canada, you talked about the boom in Cameroon.
Yes.
And for years and years in Canada, particularly English Canada, we bemoaned the failure of our film industry to take off.
I have to mention that because when I was doing my research, we know of fantastic, famous Canadian actors excelling in Hollywood. I can think of Ryan Reynolds or even the other Ryan Gosling, and even famous filmmaker James Cameron, all from Canada, but making it big in Hollywood in the United States of America. Right. What is holding back the Canadian film industry? Well,
I'd say we're not being held back anymore, because there has been. I think our films are doing much better. But I think the big challenge for us was, it's both. It was both an opportunity and a challenge. It's that huge neighbor next door. So Canadian. Although I should make there is a difference between English Canadian audiences and French Canadian audiences.
Is there?
So in Quebec, because of language, there was always a domestic audience for Quebec films.
Okay.
So Quebec's got a population of 8 million and has a natural interest in its own cultural products. And so Quebec films have always done well domestically in Quebec, whereas English Canadian films typically have had to compete with Hollywood. And so English Canadian films have kind of struggled. But over the years, you've seen these very prominent directors who have emerged, who are viewed and perceived as Canadian, as opposed to somebody like James Cameron, who's most people don't know he's Canadian.
Yes.
He'll be perceived as a Hollywood director. But you have people like Atta Magoyan, David Cronenberg, who, their films have won, the biggest and the best international prizes.
Okay.
But they're viewed as, in the case of those two, they're Toronto filmmakers who make Canadian films. Now, a new phenomenon you've seen, and actually this was, so one of the big blockbusters, one of the big movies to come out in the last few weeks is, in the States, is Dune. Dune is directed by Denis Villeneuve. Denis Villeneuve, that's not an American name.
Yes.
And he was an accomplished Quebec director before he moved to making Hollywood films, but nonetheless with a very, I'm going to say, a very Quebecois sensibility.
Okay.
I don't know what, it's hard to determine, it's hard to identify which factors contributed to Canada going from having been kind of in this perennial struggle, particularly
in the shadows,
on the English side, to emerging. Now, I will say that there has been a lot of government support, and if you look at so the two films we have in competition at the YARHA Festival.
YARRA Film Festival.
One of the things I always do, and probably nobody else does this, not really very interesting, but at the end of the film, and the credits come up, and you see the various funds that have supported the making of the film.
Yes.
And you'll have Telefilm Canada, which is a federal agency, and there could be an Ontario agency, there could be a Quebec agency, depending on if it's an English Canadian film or French Canadian film, and then you see private sector. So there'll be the Rogers. Rogers is a huge private sector media conglomerate in Canada. You'll see support from the Rogers Film Fund. Now, what does that reflect? That reflects a conscious decision on the part of Canadian governments, but also Canadian private sector, of the importance of investing in individual films in order to make the overall industry a success.
I think that has been a cry right here in Cameroon, to have the government invest in the movie sector in the country. And if you can take from the example in your country, it could be easily practiced here as well. I'm going to say a big welcome to you, Yanga Bale Aimé Cesar. How are you doing?
I'm fine.
Okay, you're representing the YARRA Film Festival.
Yes.
We're going to be talking a little bit more about the film festival.
Yes.
But first off, let's have a little break, promo break. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Promo break. Your Excellency, Richard Bale, hope you've been having a lovely moment with us this morning.
Very much so.
Okay, we've been talking about the movie industry in Canada and looking at lessons we can learn to better our film industry right here. And you're making a comment that works so well because for a long time, the Cameroon film industry has been in the shadows of the Nigerian film industry. And there's been that temptation to either copy, get their market, and even when the actors come here to support the industry, some people have issues with that. But you just told us of the growth that has been experienced in the Canadian film industry after being in the shadows for such a long time, and also the importance of government support. Now let's go back to the YARRA Film Festival. It's running from, it started on the 31st of October 2021 and it runs to the 7th of November 2021. If you want to watch some of the Canadian movies, when can we do that?
Well, you have to get organized today because the two films in competition are both on today.
Okay.
And I'll tell you a little bit about the two films. So the first one, which is called Kwesipan, is on today at 3 o'clock at the Institut Français.
Yeah.
And the second one, which is called The Grizzlies, is on at the Esplanade at the Mairie I was going to say Mairie de Montréal, but we're not in Montréal.
No.
The Mairie de Yaoundé at 6:30. Now, what's interesting, and this was really coincidental. So Kwesipan is a film made in Quebec, so it's a French language film. The Grizzlies is a film made by an Ontario filmmaker, so it's an English language film.
Okay.
But both are set in the far north of Canada, in indigenous Inuit communities.
Interesting.
And they deal in very different ways with similar issues. And really, it deals with both the social problems in these indigenous communities, and when I say far north, these are remote communities, places where most Canadians have never traveled. I mean, they're so far in the north. Dealing with the social problems, but also dealing with the relationship between those indigenous communities and the majority, what we now recognize as the settler community. It's often said of Canada that we didn't colonize anybody.
Okay.
So in an African context, people look at Canada and say, "Oh, you didn't colonize anybody." But actually, we colonized ourselves. We colonized our own country.
Okay.
Europeans came 400 years ago, displaced the indigenous communities, and there's been a kind of a reckoning, a kind of an awakening in Canada, particularly in the last year, about the history and the consequences of that history, where it's the indigenous communities who have, in many cases, suffered. That's a dimension that is examined in a very, I'm going to say, in a very painful way in those two films.
I'm sure you cannot give the full story. If not, why would we go to watch?
Right.
So a reminder, you can watch one of these movies this evening, 6:30.
One this afternoon and one this evening.
Okay, one this afternoon and one in the evening. So, High Commissioner, you've been in Cameroon for getting to 2 years now. What's your favorite meal?
Favorite meal? Okay, you've got my weak spot. So what I have not been good at is engaging with Cameroonian food.
Really?
Yes, I admit. Give me a 0 out of 10. I mean, of course, I've had ndole.
Okay, Ariane still guessed it.
Relief.
Yes.
But honestly, I give myself very low marks on that particular thing.
What about the music?
Okay. There I think. So a long time ago, I spent 2 years actually in Nigeria. I'm not going to tell you how long ago. And there I was exposed to African music, and I think particularly a lot, Congolese, that kind of style. But I hadn't come back to Africa for many, many, many years. So one of the great things about coming back to Cameroon was rediscovering African music, including Cameroonian music. And of course, there's some great world-famous Cameroonian artists. And what you see today, at least this is what I have seen with my limited exposure nonetheless, is that there's a very dynamic young music scene here with a lot of Anglophones.
A lot of them. We're going to get back to the story, but immediately after the commercial break. Talking about music in Cameroon, and I was very happy to see you supporting Mr. Leo.
Yeah, that was where we met the first time. You came to the Canadian residence where we were doing an event with Mr. Leo. Now, for me, even though I very much enjoy African music, it's still a learning process. So when I'm introduced to new Cameroonian artists, I have to sometimes ask a very embarrassing question.
What's that question?
Say, is this person famous? and so I'll do that in my office. In the privacy of my office, I'll ask one of my staff. And that was the case with Mr. Leo. So who's this Mr. Leo?
Did you really ask, is Mr. Leo famous?
Yes, yeah, because now, of course, now I know. And particularly having partnered with him at this event, I saw how Cameroon just adore his music.
Yes.
And that was so. What we did with Mr. Leo was, one of the things that I think is really fantastic is when music stars, film stars, athletes, when they take the decision to use their fame as a platform to support social issues which they care about. And this was, Mr. Leo came to us in that context. He actually, I think we had previously done something with Daphne, with her Be Woman Foundation. And I'm going to embarrass myself by confessing that, yes, I had to turn to my staff member and ask, who's Daphne? Is she famous? No, but the other trick is that I go on YouTube and then you see if it's 1.7 million views, you know, okay, this person is famous. But Mr. Leo came to us, I think, because he'd heard that we had worked with Daphne, and he made this proposal. He explained to us about the Youth Academy, which he wants to develop, which would not only be to develop Cameroonian musical and artistic talent, but also to imbue those up-and-coming artists with a social conscience, shall we say, so that as they develop as artists, they also develop that they commit to supporting causes which are dear to them. And so we were very happy to provide that platform for Mr. Leo to help him launch his foundation.
And that's so beautiful, as you said before, when an artist recognizes that fame is visibility and they can also lift up other causes, that is very important. But then the YARRA Film Festival has started, is ongoing, ends on the 7th of November. Cameroonian movies, Canadian movies, it's an opportunity for you to watch. A big thank you to Sylvie Nouette, who is the founder of YARRA.
And she's the driving force.
The driving force.
I've seen Sylvie at work. Without her, it wouldn't work.
Yes, and you will also be here tomorrow to tell us more about the film festival in the French language.
In the French language.
Thank you again, High Commissioner, for coming.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's been wonderful to spend some time with you and talk a little bit about Canada and a little bit about Cameroon. Yeah.
I leave you with this song by Mr. Leo.
Ah, perfect.
G. Thanks for watching Cameroon Feeling until Thursday. Stay tuned to programs on CRTV. Bye.
We gotta light up a fire. We getting higher. We feel the power. Oh.